Welcome everybody to this session, which is about hearing from the community. My name's Alison Garnham. I'm the Chief Executive of the Child Poverty Action Group, and I'm going to be chairing this session. You'll see there's a fantastic array of people here who are about to talk to you, but I just wanted to start off by making a few comments about why I'm here. And coming from the Child Poverty Action Group, obviously, one of my chief concerns is what's happening to children in poverty. We know that the economy is currently in recovery, but for a significant part of the population, things are still pretty bad. In fact, in my view, we're heading for a child poverty crisis. The Institute for Fiscal Studies says that there'll be nearly 1 million more children in poverty by 2020. Quite interestingly, actually, Ian Duncan Smith was on the Today programme only a couple of weeks ago, and he claimed that his policies were on track to meet the 2020 target to reduce child poverty to 10%, which is very interesting when the Institute for Fiscal Studies has estimated that the level in 2020 will be 3.2 million children in poverty compared to 2.3 million today. So if he thinks he's going to achieve 1.3 million, I'd really like to see his workings. Seems to be pretty unlikely that we'll get there. The effect of deficit reduction, particularly on the bottom half of the income distribution, the poorest half, has been really quite dramatic. If you look at the Treasury documents for each budget and spending review, you'll see that 4 out of 5 people in the top half of the income distribution are better off, whereas 4 out of 5 people in the bottom half are worse off. And so the poorer you are, the bigger hit you seem to have been taking. And this will be very costly. Donald Hirsch from Loughborough University estimated that the cost of child poverty is something like 29 billion a year. And if we see this nearly 1 million increase, it will go up to something more like 35 billion a year. So it's a very expensive thing to be doing, keeping all these children poor. And the government has just published a child poverty consultation, and there's some good things in there, like extending free school meals that you'll all know about, putting more help in with childcare costs, but at the moment it seems to be just a list of things that the government's doing, with nothing in it to tell us what they expect to achieve by it. So, with that as the background, it's really exciting what's going on in local fairness commissions and child poverty commissions up and down the country. I've spoken to a number of them. Great things going on at local, and actually chairing one in Bristol at the moment that hasn't reported yet. And they really vary in the sorts of things that they're looking at. Some are looking at tackling childcare issues, some are looking at free school meals, living wage, educational attainment gaps, all sorts of different things. In Bristol, we focused on living wage, on early years, parental employment, and how you help families into work, income and debt, and healthy communities. But the selection of topics is partly as a result of other commissions going on in Bristol, so it wasn't necessarily, the obvious choice. But we've heard from lots of people at community level. We've heard from people in food banks and community centres, early years professionals, educationalists, health specialists. And the lasting impression really for me was some of the people that we met at local community organisations and food banks who were facing benefit cuts, crises caused by that, a jobs market where people who were in work were at food banks because they couldn't get more than a very low number of hours of work, particularly people working in supermarkets, for example, couldn't pay their rent, huge holes torn in their income by cuts to their housing benefit, and really moving stories about having to explain to their kids that they couldn't go on school trips as a result, and the sadness that caused them, the sense of shame and kind of failure, if you like. But one of the really striking things about people who were there was that the number of them who were there as a result of delays and sanctions and sheer maladministration of benefits. It wasn't just about cuts, it was about the way that benefits are administered. Some of the first people to have reported on the impact of what's been happening on families have been teachers and health professionals, and we're going to hear from educationalists today, so I'm really looking forward to hearing what they've got to say. So I think without any further ado, we need to hear from them now. If I can just explain who it is we've got coming to speak to us. There's David Ellis, who's a head teacher from York High School. Tracy Ralph, who's head teacher at Westfield Primary. And we've got Tracy Robbins from Joseph Roundtree, who's the programme manager of Neighbourhood Approaches to Loneliness, who's going to talk to us about their research. So if we start with David, okay. Do you want to go over there? And I think you're going to chip in at various points, aren't you?
So, good afternoon. As has already been said, I'm David Ellis, and I've been the head teacher of York High School in the west of York since it opened in September 2007. I'm going to be joined in my presentation this morning by three of my students, Megan and Josh and Edward. I just need to say something about Megan, because Megan stepped in at 9:30 this morning to help out with this presentation. And I know she's going to do a fantastic job, but she is particularly nervous. In the next few minutes, what we'd like to do is share with you a number of issues that we believe impact on education, the well-being and personal development of young people. We hope that you'll be able to reflect on what we have to say and consider our contributions in your policy making in the future. All of us have no doubt that education and therefore schools have a vital part to play in creating a fairer society. I am very keen, however, for you to hear these issues from the mouths of young people themselves. But as a final means of introduction, I'd just like to give you a sense of the York High School community. York High is a genuinely comprehensive school of about 800 young people from year 7 to 11. Our intake is a little below national average in terms of ability. About 255 of our young people receive free school meals. But because of the Ever 6 rule, about 40% of our students qualify for pupil premium. Only a very small number of those qualify for reasons other than the economic circumstances of their family. Our catchment ranges from, I guess you would call, leafy middle-class areas of the city to areas of social housing with deprivation issues which wouldn't be out of place in inner-city Leeds or similar. In recent years, the educational outcomes of our young people have risen significantly, but they remain amongst the lowest in the city, even though the progress of our students from their starting point is very good. So, what I'd like to do next is I'd like you to hear from the young people themselves about what they think about fairness. The three of them are going to come up together and they're going to give their presentations.
Hello, my name is Megan. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. I want you to consider the way in which young people are characterised in society and how we are judged by where we live and where we go to school. As a young person myself, I get very angry and really frustrated when people make assumptions about me because of where I come from. Like all of my friends, I'm living through the big changes that are taking place in the education system. Some of the students at my school will take these changes in their stride. They have the ability and the confidence to cope with the change and the huge increase at the end of the course exams. Others are very worried and really struggle with believing they can be successful. Often, but not always, these types of students come from situations where they may have been unhappy or at worst the victims of real abuse. At times the behaviour of these students may not be very good, but it doesn't mean they don't care, have ambitions or want to do well. So why do so many people dismiss them as a waste of space, lazy or uncaring? I don't know any young people who don't want to be successful, but they sometimes don't have the skills, the support, the self-esteem or resilience to make it on their own. Is that fair? Why, when we are putting more and more pressure on young people, are we reducing the amount of support available for them, particularly in the area of mental health? In my school, we are lucky that we do have the access to caring staff and a specialist counsellor, but many other young people don't. If we want young people from so-called poorer backgrounds to succeed, then they must have access to a wide range of services to help them achieve.
Hello, my name is Josh. I would like you to consider how the money available to a young person's family can still have an unfair impact on their education, even though the state education is free. If I asked you what you remember the most from your school days and what made the most impact, I guess that very few of you will talk about something that happened in the classroom. Many of you will reflect on a school visit, perhaps a residential or outdoor activity. With my head teacher stood next to me, I'm not going to say that lessons are not important. But it is obvious to us all that education is about much more than exams. I know, of course, that every school provides other activities and opportunities for pupils, but my point is this. Is it fair that young people from better off families getting better opportunities to get a wider educational and life experience? I'm not saying that just because some families can't afford to pay for some school visits that no one should be able to go, but if school visits are important, we need to find ways for everyone who wants to be able to take part. On the subject of travel, another unfairness is that a lot of travel companies price their holidays. We all know that the prices go up a lot during the school holiday periods. This means for poorer families, there is a choice between the family not having a holiday or taking a holiday in school time and breaking the law. In the past, head teachers like Mr. Ellis could authorize some holidays in time, but now there is no such discretion. This doesn't seem fair to me.
Hello, my name is Edward. I would like to talk to you about the unfairness between schools in connections with the things they expect parents to buy to enable their child to be just a normal part of the school community. Firstly, and most importantly, school uniform. Recently, the Youth Council in York looked at the cost of the uniform that secondary schools in York expected parents to provide for their child. This included the cost of any compulsory PE kit and uniform items that were unique to the school, like ties, blazers, jumpers, etc. The difference ranged between £75 to over £200. How can that be fair? An expensive uniform does not equal a better school, but it might discourage poorer families from attending. Why are adults so obsessed with uniform? Why do they judge a school by whether or not it has a blazer in its uniform? At York High, the pupils, parents and staff together chose the uniform we are wearing today. We agree that having an identity for a school is a good thing, and that a reasonably priced uniform can actually make it easier for families than having to buy other clothes. A uniform can also hide the differences in the incomes of families. On non-uniform days, some kids stay away from school rather than show they haven't got expensive designer gear. So we are not against a uniform, but we think schools should have to keep them in a maximum amount. We also know that some schools charge pupils for materials and subjects like DT or art or food. We know that technically this is a voluntary contribution, but imagine how it feels for those kids who know their family can't afford it. For many pupils that I know, these things can be embarrassing and they don't really want to talk about them. Even being on free school meals can be really difficult. You don't really want your friends to know, and you definitely don't want to be in a separate school. At York High, we all have a thumb account for paying for our food. No one needs to know whether our account is credited by us or by the school. You might think these things are not very important, but how you feel about yourself makes a big difference to how much you achieve.
Thank you, guys, and especially to Megan. Well done. It may be that what we've said to you so far this morning is nothing new. If that's the case, then that's even more upsetting, because I would ask that it's time that we did something about it. Perhaps you are thinking that pupil premium is the answer. In reality, it's only part of the solution. As a head teacher, I welcome the resources that pupil premium is bringing into my school. But in truth, it's only partly replacing other funding streams for disadvantage and curriculum flexibility that have now been removed. In practice, it's not a new pot of gold. In the last few years, I've had my overall budget reduced, and this has meant that we've had to reduce the number of support staff and, outside of the classroom, activities and alternative programmes that could provide for young people who find learning more challenging. You can't help but notice that reducing budgets impacts most on pupils who are most in need of support. Surely this isn't fair. Over the weekend, I read with interest Michael Gove's speech to the Policy Exchange, and I'm sure you all read it. I actually agree, surprisingly, with many of the things that he had to say. I agree with his determination to ensure better outcomes for young people from disadvantaged backgrounds, and this is to be commended. I do have no doubt that his commitment to this is genuine. Some of the proposed changes to performance measures that recognise that the progress that young people make from their starting points is also to be welcomed. But in the context of today's conference about fairness, I would urge Mr Gove, however, to think further about some of the reforms to the examination system. A system which is based increasingly on examinations which doesn't recognise the challenges of vulnerable young people, the issues of building confidence and self-esteem, and the mental health time bomb which is ticking in the background, is in my view patently unfair. We are in danger of creating an education system that is even more unfair and potentially divisive. As Megan said, in 31 years of teaching, I've rarely met a young person who doesn't want to succeed, or a parent who doesn't want the best for their child. But as a classroom teacher and as a head teacher, it doesn't always feel like that when you are faced at times with challenging behaviour from young people and with little support from the parents. But we must recognise that these are symptoms and not causes of the poor outcomes for many young people. It seems fairly obvious to me that a young person with a challenging background, with mental health issues, with low self-esteem, a young carer, is likely to find an assessment system based solely on exams and memory, which relies heavily on revision skills, difficult to cope with. It is no surprise then that at times they'll react negatively to their school experience. It's also fairly obvious that young people from backgrounds where they have little access to reading, minimal cultural capital, and little practical support from their parents, who may themselves have failed, and who are frightened of the future, are most likely to fail under the new exam regime. For me, this goes to the heart of creating a fairer society. I don't want assessment made easier. I don't want excuses being made for young people or their teachers. But I do want us to recognise that achievement can be demonstrated and captured in many different ways. We need to provide young people with the opportunities to demonstrate their strengths and value their personal qualities and skills. In simple terms, we need to provide young people with the opportunity to demonstrate and experience success. This is not, by the way, a call to make assessment easier. It's a call to make it different. As a head teacher, I'm very happy for the outcomes of my school to be subject to public scrutiny. I'm happy to be held to account and challenged about what we do. But I do want to be measured on the positive difference we make to our young people as human beings, not just how many grade A's they got. If this were to happen, it would be a strong message about the kind of society we want to be, where everyone, whatever their academic ability, is recognised for what they can contribute to the society, not just the number of exam certificates that they collected along the way. It's more likely to enable young people to feel part of their community and to be able to build a successful future for themselves and their families. At the age of 53 and 31 years in teaching, I'm still idealistic enough to believe that education can change the world. This means it's an essential step on the road to a fairer society, and we must ensure that all young people get the best available opportunities, whatever their background. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much, David. I think that was quite an inspiring start to the presentations, and thanks especially to Megan and Josh and Edward. It was brilliant. So now I want to introduce Tracy Ralph, who's also a head teacher at Westfield Primary.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you today. Dave and I work in really close partnership in the West, along with the other primary schools in our community. And we serve, I feed Dave. None of those pupils are actually mine, but I was so proud of you anyway, just because you're West. The life expectancy in West is below the York average. So York's leafy and shiny and gorgeous, but there are pockets of deprivation, and the community we serve is one of them. So the child poverty in Westfield is double the York average, and the life expectancy, for example, if you're a man and you live in our community, you're likely to die 5 years younger than if you live in another part of York. The thing that's distinctive about my school, not that we've got everything right by any means, but the thing that is distinctive is that we have kind of bucked the trend. You will have heard that there's a gap between all children and children who are eligible for free school meals. Children who live in areas of disadvantage and children living in poverty tends to do less well academically. I read Michael's speech on Friday, and I agreed with most of what he said too, and particularly when he talked about outstanding teaching, good and outstanding teaching, when he talked about the absolute moral purpose to ensure that the most vulnerable in our community, in our schools, are given equal access and equal rights and equal opportunities. You know, I believe passionately in that. And they've spent a lot of money, the government has spent a lot of money in trying to narrow the gap, and it is closing nationally, but it's still stubborn and really frustrating. And luckily for us at Westfield, we've managed to completely buck that trend. So, and like Dave, you know, I absolutely agree with accountability, and Michael Gove talked about that too. Quite rightly. And, you know, if you go to Weight Watchers, as I regularly do, you know, they're not interested if you're grade 9 at piano. They're not interested if you could, you know, they're interested in how much weight you've lost. And schools are like that, Ofsted's like that. But, you know, you can have lots of lovely things about your school, but what you're measured by is your pupil attainment and progress, quite rightly. That's my day job, bread and butter, and that's what I did before I did anything else at my school. I've been there since 2009, third headship. So just to give you a couple of figures, if you look at the Year 1 phonics test, which was one of the government's new initiatives, we have lots of them. We have to be lively working with Michael Gove, but he introduced the phonics check 2 or 3 years ago now. All children nationally, 69% of those children pass that test. At Westfield, 70% of our children do. Our children enter well below national average. If you look at free school meal children nationally, 57% of those children succeed, so that's 12% below the national average. At Westfield, 70% of our children achieve. So the performance of our free school meal children is the same as it is for all children, which is different to national. If you look at the Year 2 recheck, 62% of free school meal children nationally meet that standard. 80% of our children do at Westfield. And then jump into Year 6, I won't bore you with all the detail, but it's the same across the piece. And at Year 6, which is externally marked SATs, at Westfield, 47% of children make outstanding progress. The national figure is 31%. And then if you look at the free school meal children, nationally 34% of those children make outstanding progress. 50% of our children at Westfield do. And 100% of our free school meal children last year left school with the correct qualifications and having made good or outstanding progress. So we are proud of that. So I won't bore you with the kind of outstanding teaching and all the sort of bread and butter things that we do at our school, because I'm conscious of time, and I just want to talk to you about a couple of things that we do that I think link to the agenda we're talking about this morning. So take it as read that we've sorted out attainments and progress and standards. I believe really passionately in the voice of the child, and I think a lot of people underestimate small people. Small people are young citizens, and they have a voice and they have a right to speak and to be heard. And I think to build children's self-esteem and self-confidence and to empower them gives them skills for life above and beyond their qualifications, so that if you are a young woman who ends up in an abusive relationship as an adult woman, you are better equipped if you understand your rights, if you understand your freedoms. So, I mean, I've been teaching a long time too, and governments change, curriculums change, but this little old book, this was published in about 23 years ago. And it's the little book of the rights of the child, children's rights and responsibilities. It's a UNICEF book, and this is a child's version. And I've moved to lots of different schools, curriculums have come and gone, and fashions change. But the rights of the child and the child's responsibilities, I don't think those have changed very much. And I teach my children these things. There's the taught curriculum, there's a hidden curriculum, but these things really matter. I'm just going to read you a couple of them. Article 12 of the UNICEF
little book of child's rights, it says children have the right to say what they think should happen when adults are making decisions, and they have the right to have their opinions taken into account. So in the West, just as one example, we organised a question time event about, years ago, I'll lose track. We gave the children all of the political parties, don't know what you call them, you know, the manifesto type things when you're coming into an election. The children read them. The children are bright. Our children are intelligent, bright people, and they have a view. They read all of the different, whatever you call them, and we invited all the different members of the political parties to come to York High School. Dave chaired it, and we had members of the local community as well. And our children put to the politicians their questions. And one of the things I was most proud about was each school could choose 2 questions. And the schools' councils got together and we debated, because we didn't want to all be going with the same question. And Hobmore Oaks, which is the special school for the whole of York, is in our patch. And when all the children came up with their questions, my children, I could cry, but when it got to choosing their question, having heard everybody else's questions, my children said their questions are more important than our questions. So instead of choosing their own questions, they chose, so the Hobmore children got to ask their own 2 questions, and then my children chose to use their opportunity to ask on the Hobmore Oaks, children with profound disabilities. They got to speak on their behalf, which is, I was very proud of that. And at the back of this, I'm conscious of time, I do need to move on, but it talks about the responsibilities as well. Can we talk to children about your rights and your responsibilities? So if children have a right to be educated, they have an obligation to learn as much as their capabilities allow, and where possible to share their knowledge and experience with others. You know, our children have a civic duty. They have a duty to make a positive contribution to their community, and we try and instill that in them. I'm just going to talk a couple more things, just 2 minutes. So some of the things we've done, I think, that have made a difference in terms of outcomes. Things like breakfast club. It's not rocket science, is it? But if children are not heard to read at home, if nobody's available to hear them read at home, or if their parents can't read, yes, you can do all the adult literacy stuff and all of that stuff that we do, but we actually nitty-gritty get the children in. We pay for them to have a breakfast and we hear them read. We pay for our Year 6 children to be reading buddies, so they go into the playground and they fish children in and they hear them read. We pay teaching assistants to come to breakfast club and they hear them read. So we just catch them, feed them and hear them read. It's not rocket science, it's really obvious, isn't it? But these are the kind of simple things that have worked. We use ring-fence money creatively. So there was this thing called Me Too a couple of years ago, and you had to use it for out-of-school clubs. So I think if you join boxes and think, well, we're interested in child obesity and health and diet and all of that, Cycling City York, so we thought we'll have a cycling club. I mean, we didn't have much of a club really, but if we said we were having a cycling club, it meant we could buy bikes. So we just bought about 60 brand new bikes out of the Me Too money so that we could give children bikes who didn't have a bike and couldn't afford a bike and were never going to have a bike. And so those sorts of things about being creative about how you can use your funding, I think, is helpful. We link with business partners, we're really big into that. I believe really passionately in aspirations. I want my children to believe that they have the right to go to Russell Group universities. I want my girls to actually believe they could be leading a FTSE 100 company. I've listened to Christine Lagarde talking about still the inequality between gender. Malala, you'll have heard Malala, I'm sure, talk about the inequality still for women today. And I talk to my girls. We use young business partners, entrepreneurs. We haul them into school. We use young women like Emily Cummins, who invented this solar fridge, to come and talk to our girls. We talk to them about going into engineering and going into maths. We need more women. We're missing a trick. Digital inclusion. We use our business partners who, for example, give our children laptops. Great. Our children can't hop onto the internet at home because their parents can't afford to put in their broadband, their internet connection. So there's digital exclusion there, which we're working really hard to address. And luckily for us, we work in York, we're forward-thinking, who's thinking about that cabling and infrastructure to make it a more equal opportunity for all children in the city. We do loads of stuff, community gardens, cross-generational projects. I haven't got long enough to tell you all the things that we do, and I'm conscious of your time and that you will want an opportunity to ask questions of the panel and to hear from others. But can I just say that I think it's great that York I'm proud to work in a city that has an absolute commitment to addressing poverty and inequality in our society. It's a privilege to work here, and very grateful that we were given the opportunity to speak to you this morning. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tracy. That was great. And now on to another Tracy, Tracy Robbins from Joseph Roundtree Foundation.
There's a few Traces today. Some people may wonder why I am here talking about loneliness at a poverty and fairness event, and wonder what on earth it is I'm up to, especially probably my JRF colleagues who know a lot more about poverty. But I'm here mainly to talk about who I am and who I know, and not just what we did. But before I do go on, I will say from the loneliness research we did in 2 neighbourhoods in York and 2 in Bradford, the top 3 issues that cause loneliness were isolation, getting older, and being and bereavement. The 4th major issue of loneliness across all 4 neighbourhoods were lack of opportunities for young people. And at a time when we see our resources to our young people cut, we need to think about this seriously. Also from the research, we found out that the area that was most deprived and most diverse had treble the amount of causes of loneliness. And loneliness is serious, and we have to take it seriously, like poverty. And as you can see, this lovely quote from Mother Teresa, loneliness is the feeling of being unwanted, and it's the most terrible of poverties. And take it from me, someone who's experienced both loneliness and poverty, I would say they're very similar. And when asked to speak to you today, I wanted to talk to you about loneliness and poverty. I reminisce quite with rosy glasses on quite a poor childhood. I often think of the summers with no electricity, with quite good humour, while we sort of worked up the money to see how we could put it back on for the winter. I often reminisce about getting my uniform from jumble sales and charity shops, and of our family shopping, which consisted of a tray of eggs and a sack of spuds for months and months and months. And I often think of this and reminisce about it. But what makes me sad is the impact that that had on me as a child and the rest of my family. So however poverty is defined, it causes suffering because it involves something that is essential to our human life. And what we really want to do in this session is connect poverty to the people. It really impacted, and I suffered as a child. I didn't have uniform at school and was severely bullied, not just for being ginger, which did add into it, and a diet of potatoes and eggs, yes. But this meant that I really suffered at school, so I did not go to school. Both my parents worked, but did really low-paid jobs. We were 4 children. I was the last one. You know, I would stay off school and clean somebody else's house or babysit to bring a little bit of money into that house. And the embarrassment I suffer today working for JRF in meetings when I can't spell and my grammar is dire is the legacy of not going to school. When I did eventually decide to return to education as an adult, my mother said, "You're going to make yourself ill and you're getting above your station." There are so many children, so many people I work with where aspiration is not even an option. The expectation is you get out there and you bring in some money as soon as possible, because that's the right thing to do. Poverty, like problematic loneliness, pervades us to our core. We all know what it's like to be lonely sometimes, an anniversary, a bank holiday Monday, when our children leave home. And often, hopefully, it's transient and we ring somebody up and it's okay. And the problem we've been researching around loneliness is that problematic loneliness that stays with you a long time, that you can't get over and that you're stuck with. And that's the same with poverty. We've all had skint months. We've all hit the buffers of our credit cards or gone into our overdraft. We might have even had difficult years. Poverty is about having nothing for years and years and years. There is no overdraft. Do you know, there is no credit card. And we become stripped of our reserves and our resilience is weakened and we're susceptible to so many things that we have to sort of, it's really hard to come from a place of nothing, constant nothing. I remember, not just from my childhood, I had quite a poor adulthood as well. No surprise there. So I was on benefits for 9 years as a single parent after a rather disastrous marriage. The thing I remember most from that is that constantly living on the edge of running out, of having nothing, of not being able to afford new shoes, school trips, uniforms. There was not cupboards full of 3 for 2 shampoos and conditioners that you've tried and never used. You know, you had one bottle, and when it ran out, you'd use your washing up liquid. You know, fruit and veg was laughable. I got what I could afford, and it was awful. And it was 9 years worth of beg, borrowing and stealing. For most of those years I didn't have a telly because I wanted a telephone and I could not afford both and I had to make that choice. Nowadays people aren't expected to make a choice. They're told they can have everything. And our companies and our credit people really enjoy people trying to live up to the expectations that they see others achieve. We become world weary and worn. And what's more, you become hopeless. You feel worthless. You feel your life is wasted. And it's that true thing of you feel you are unwanted in society. These are some of the risk factors to loneliness. I think you'll agree with me that they're actually a lot of the risk factors to poverty. We've heard about transport, the physical environment, community, housing, technology, crime, population changes, location. We've heard about how our health and being out of work really impacts us. When I worked with communities, when everybody was talking about worklessness, they hated the word. It was so akin to worthlessness, you couldn't get much closer. And that's the sort of perception around it. The lack of support networks, the loss of mobility that's caused by poverty and loneliness, and lots of other changes that we don't expect, like becoming a carer, whether that's of a child or of another adult. Loneliness has a serious effect on our health. You're twice as likely to die prematurely if you're lonely. Poverty has a serious effect on our health and our mortality too. And what we really want you to go away is that poverty is about people's lives. It is personal. And yes, we can look at the structures and we can look at the policy, and we have to. But this is about children, and this is about adults, and this is about people's lives. This is about fellow human beings. And I'm very lucky to have a very inspirational fellow human being here. So I'd like to hand over to Stacey for a while, who was one of the community researchers that worked with us for 4 years, tirelessly, unpaid, as a community researcher on this project. Welcome, Stacey.
Today I am here to share some personal situations I have faced in my life, generally due to what I would call a lack of money. Most people would call it poverty, and I am still classed as being in the poverty bracket. However, I feel rich compared to where I have been. Do not get me wrong, I know there is people far worse off than the situations I have faced in my life. I take my hat off to them for carrying on and standing strong. But today I would like to share some times I found quite a struggle. Times of desperation, times of despair, times of needing real help that was not available to me or not known to me at the time. Times of wondering how I can be alive and not living. Times of hardness to the point it physically makes you numb. I want to reflect to around 6 years ago. At the time, I was living with my ex-husband, his young son, and our baby girl. My ex-husband was going blind. He has an incurable eye disease, retinitis pigmentosa, and he was unfortunate enough to be half deaf as well. I was not working. I was trying to look after the family. Money was a real struggle. We wasn't entitled to disability living allowance and had to fight at an independent tribunal to get incapacity allowance. Unlike most people on benefits, we had to pay so much for rent and council tax, as incapacity allowance was not classed as a full state benefit. Like anyone that runs a home, we had your must-pay utility bills. We could not afford an internet, a home phone, TV package, or any small luxuries that most people take for granted today. We'd pay-as-you-go mobiles, but never had enough money to top them up though. These are all things that us as people can live without. But in this time, I remember literally living off one piece of toast every 2 days to make sure my husband and our kids had eaten. Having a constant knot in my stomach and being anemic due to poor diet or lack of diet. I could not even afford to buy second-hand clothes. The clothes I had did not fit properly. I got excited if a free bag of clothes off another person came my way. When times are desperate like this, people think, let's sell something. I had no gold or treasures or anything of value. Struggling to carpet the house we lived in, having to compromise, do we eat tonight and go cold? Or do we put the heating on, get warm and go hungry? Our families were all in poverty brackets too, struggling to make ends meet, so they could not help us either. Nobody had the time of day for people like us. We were isolated alone and nobody cared. Nobody believed in us. We were nothing. People looked down their noses at us because of our lack of money, but we are still human beings. But we're not treated like we were or given a fair amount of respect that every person is entitled to, no matter of their situation. Whether it was ignorance or people just wanted to turn a blind eye, I do not know. All I know, it was a hard and lonely place, and no one deserves to be in this situation. I mean, finances were a constant battle, but things did improve. I managed to get on some family learning courses to try to better my education and maybe open some doors. They provided free childcare too. I have a lot of praise to give family learning. Through this, people saw me, the actual me, rather than just judging me through appearance. They do say appearances can be deceiving. I made friends which I had not had in a long time, as the friends I used to have stopped asking me to meet for lunch or a coffee at the cafe, as they knew the answer would be, sorry, I would love to, but I cannot afford it. So to start having a social life again meant so much to me. A few years ago, me and my ex-husband parted, and due to some unfortunate circumstances, I've had some operations and had to deal with the fact I could not have any more children, and that's all I believed life was about. I know I'm very lucky to have the one, but this was a hard and lonely time for me. I didn't get any help. There was help available, once a month on a Tuesday night the other side of town, but I could not afford a babysitter, I couldn't travel to it, and had no one to help. I'd become a single parent on income support with still a fairly young child. Eventually, I got rehomed with my daughter. When I got the keys to this property, all we had was literally a chest of drawers and some black bags. I had to start from scratch all over again. I was not entitled to any grants. Not being on the same benefit for over 6 months was the reason why. I was so tempted to do a crime, go away for a couple of months. I know to get the help then. It makes me realise why some of them do it. Managed to get a crisis loan in the end, which I believe they don't do anymore. £525 to carpet my house, buy quilts, beds, mattresses, cooker, washer, knife, forks, plates, pans to cook with, fridge and freezer. I literally own none of this. Even now, I honestly don't know how I managed it. It was a very lonely time, a very much an everyday fight and struggle to keep going. It did have its impact on my health, and I don't know how I came from that to where I am now. At the time, I was still doing any family learning courses that came my way to try better my education. Through this, I heard about a project Joseph Roundtree's Foundation and Joseph Roundtree's Housing Trust was doing, called Neighbourhood Approaches to Loneliness. And when I found out more, I jumped on board. As to be honest, I was lonely and I'd lived quite a lonely life. I really care for others and wanted to help make a difference. As I know, if no one speaks out, other people don't see it as much. It must be easy that way for others. I have to say, this project helped me grow as a person. It helped my confidence, helped me believe in myself, which helped others to believe in me. And the people I met from Joseph Roundtree's Foundation and Joseph Roundtree's Housing Trust and other professionals through this actually acknowledged and listened to me, Stacey, and took on board everything I said and the community said. I loved this work. I put my all into it. It made me realise how much I love to help others. I felt like I'd found my niche in life. I felt like I wasn't just put here to have kids. I had more to offer. I was alive again and not just living. My finances were still a struggle, but I was eating daily now and could shop in a charity shop and even supermarket clothes once in a blue moon. It wasn't all plain sailing mind. The job centre was going to stop me income support because I was doing volunteer work. It really hurt me when the job centre told me this. It felt like I walked into a brick wall. I really loved my volunteer work. I put my all into it. I had so much passion and it kept me going so much. I couldn't just give it up. But if I didn't, how would I keep a roof over my head and feed my daughter? This may sound sad, but it hurt me so much. I actually cried over it. I was devastated. Endless nights of restless sleep. Until one day I thought, the stresses this is causing me. I don't like lying, but truth be told, I lied to the job centre and told them I wasn't doing it anymore. A couple of weeks later, one of the other single mums who was a volunteer got her money stopped for doing it. She went through hell, bless her, so much for the bigger society. Through doing my volunteer work, I managed to get in paid work part-time as an independent living support worker for vulnerable adults. I've been doing this for a year and a half now, and I'm even starting a diploma in health and social care. I have a partner I've been with for 6 months, and my little girl is 7 now. Compared to where I have been, I have come far, but it's still a struggle, making ends meet, compromising all the time. My partner has no qualifications as such. He's managed to get a part-time cleaning job, minimum wage, but it's all that is available. I mean, it works well in the fact our shifts work around each other, so we do not need childcare. But it's still limited, as I'm, just so you know, I'm actually on below the living wage for York, so we both are on very low incomes. And we pay everything ourselves. We only just have enough money to make ends meet, and our diet is still very poor. I struggle to find money to pay my daughter's school dinners, which I need her to have school dinners, as then I know she gets a healthier diet than the one at home. She has swimming lessons too, which until recently has been funded for us. She's doing very well and becoming much more confident in water. And now this is an extra £70 a term. It's something she loves and enjoys. And I have to work out, do I take this life skill away from her? Or where can I compromise the money from? And it is hard to be honest, as this is a life skill that I do not have. And I really don't want to be in a position where I have no choice but to take this away from her. I'm better off than when I used to be with my ex-husband. But working part-time to being a single parent on benefits is not much of a difference financially, due to the extras that I have to pay, like rent, council tax, school dinners, and much more. There's no wonder why some people think, well, they're going to miss the time with the family, and they're going to be no better off working than on benefits, so why should they work? I do struggle, as I'd like to work more hours when they are available at work, but it gets paid in one hand and took off me by tax credits out the other. It's not actually financially beneficial for me to do this, as then there is extra costs like childcare that comes into it. And it turns out I'm working and missing precious time with my little girl for nothing whatsoever. She's growing so quick, and it's not like I can just do it again with a child situation, is it? In myself, I feel so much better off for working, but it is still a struggle and can be very isolating. As I hear other parents saying to me that their daughter does swimming, dance and brownies, but they've had to cut back on a violin lessons and they're only going abroad once this year. Physically makes me sick that they don't appreciate what they do have. It makes me feel so ashamed and low that I cannot afford to give my child more. For the first time early end of last year, I took my daughter on holiday to Caister for 7 nights for £300, which realistically is not much. I had to save up for 6 months just to pay for it. My daughter is nearly the size of me, and she goes through shoes so quickly, I have to make her wear them as long as she can. We still shop in charity shops and the odd supermarket clothes, but I always buy them a little bigger so they'll fit her a bit longer. We still have a poor diet because this is the only way we can seem to make ends meet, which is going to cost the government in the long run because of the health implications that this leads to. The government have made cutbacks to so many services out there which have been put in place for many people who are in similar situations to what I have been in. It was thanks to these services which got me out of that situation and gave me a chance in life. But now these opportunities have been taken away from people just like me. For instance, Family Learning, who helped me so much with many courses in childcare they provided, has all changed due to the cutbacks. They've had no choice but to stop providing childcare, as well as reducing the number of courses they can provide. This means many people don't get the chance to access these services, or a chance to make them first steps to try improving their life. And this is just one of many services affected by these cutbacks. There are so many out there who want a better life, who want to improve the situation they are in. But how are they expected to do this when day by day the help put in place is disappearing and the benefits they receive decrease with the price of living increasing? Where will it go next? More cutbacks? Loss of services? How would it feel if it was your daughter, your son, your brother, your sister who need one of these services to get their life on track? And knowing someone has robbed them of this opportunity of accomplishing their potential and realising their dreams. This is the problem we are facing in a society who is crying out for help, yet what they cry for is being cut back and taken away out of the community. This is creating an even bigger gap in society than what there was already. And that is sad when there are a lot more people today trying to bridge that gap and make a real difference. Thank you.
I told you she was good, didn't I? So, we just want to say that it's personal. That's all we want you to take away. We want you to think about, yes, what can you do professionally about loneliness, about poverty, but also what can you do personally? You know, this is not just something we need to tackle when we're at work. This is something we need to be bearing in mind all the time. We have heard children speak and grown-ups speak, and we know that its impacts on people's daily lives. And I think when we talk about loneliness, when we plan to reduce it, and hopefully when we finally do something about it, we need to remember and hold the voices of these people in our minds so that we can show a little bit more loving kindness in some of the approaches that we look at to reduce loneliness. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Really, really effective contributions there about educational attainment, how to poverty-proof the school day, how to achieve success at primary level, and also what the experience of poverty and loneliness can be like. Now's the chance for everybody to join in, participate, ask questions. Perhaps if we start with questions, there's a roving mic. Somebody at the front here.
Presentation from you and also from the researcher here. Now, not so long ago, I happened to see something on television regarding loneliness and poverty, and particularly in terms of the older people who do get very lonely in their homes, and you've got students seeking higher education who haven't got the money or can't afford to live separately, or even young people who want to have their own home but they can't. And this joint partnership between the two seemed to work very well. And I'm just wondering whether we could use a similar kind of a phenomena in a place like York, where we've got the two universities here.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Can we take a couple more while we're going around? Gentleman at the front here, and then the lady halfway up. It's you.
Yeah, I'd just like to, I've been listening to a lot of harrowing experiences over the last year, and there's a lot of people putting wonderful ideals and input in. I'd like to see more movement away from divisionism in society, where people stop using party political engineering processes to gain votes by jumping on poverty, jumping on homelessness, jumping on issues within society, and work towards more of a society where we can all get together and live together without using each other to fracture, what I call fracture away from society, where one group benefits from making gestures towards another group, using issues like loneliness, like poverty, like homelessness, and where society we can all come together, and that's just what I want to say.
Okay, thank you very much. And lady halfway up.
Hi, my name's Julie Redgrave from Bath, Yorkshire. My question is for each of you that have shared a personal experience today, which is hugely appreciated, you taking your time to do that. My question is, we're constantly hearing about interventions, services, early help, all of those kind of things, huge statements, huge programs, huge services put in place. From your experiences, where are those small changes that could have happened in your experience that would have maybe taken it in a different direction that didn't happen? I think it's about hearing about your experiences, but also learning from it as well.
Okay, thank you. Good 3 questions. Do you want to start, Tracy, with the first question about using the university?
Yeah, I think there are some really good pilots of people sort of sharing their homes, sort of people that have many bedrooms. I think one of the biggest fears people have is this regulation and safeguarding issue that might be associated with it. So I would echo your sort of call to be a bit more brave and go for it, really, and look at how we can facilitate this, because I think at both age groups there's real assets, and I think people studying would really welcome, you know, the company of another person, because studying is also a very lonely and isolating time.
Thank you. So, Tracy, what are the small steps we can take? What are the effective policies? You've made them work at your school.
I think, as I said, it's just about building teams around each individual family. So getting to know your families and having we have parent support advisors, children's champions, so that you give practical support, really, depending on each person's individual circumstances. It's personalised, really, because each family's circumstances are unique. And we do things like paying for trips, paying for swimming lessons, and that sort of thing.
Yes, yeah. And did you use school funds for that, or some?
Sometimes we use pupil premium, sometimes we use school fund.
Right. Okay. Thank you. And bringing everybody together. I mean, we heard really eloquent stories about kind of, in a way, divisiveness, if you like, how people are made to feel apart. How do you bring people together more?
I think the thing that struck me most listening to colleagues that contributed later was your comment that it's personal.
Yeah.
And the thing that struck me listening to that as a head teacher, I know that these young people here and the other young people that I work with, they actually want to make a difference. And one of the things that we need to do, because this clearly isn't a simple issue to resolve, but we need to give young people the opportunity to make a contribution, because that benefits the community and it benefits them in their personal development as well. And that kind of brings me back to the point that I was making in my presentation, that there is a danger with the direction that we are going with the curriculum in schools at the moment and the accountability measures that go with it, is that it takes a very brave head teacher to create the time for young people to be able to do that. And we need to somehow recognise the value that those young people will bring from giving their time, and recognise that in some way so that, you know, it goes alongside their paper qualifications, I guess. But it isn't just about money.
No.
You know, we all know, don't we, in all of the different aspects of public life that we work in, there isn't a bottomless pit of money. And what we've got to somehow harness is the energy and the resource that there is within adults and young people. And as I've said, the young people I work with are desperate to make that difference.
Sure, thank you very much. Right, we've got 3 more already indicating. Gentleman here, lady with the blue jacket further back, and then the lady here.
Thank you. My name's Nadine Marjan from the National Health Service. I suppose the first point I wanted to make, and it was just a statement really, and I just could not make this statement given that we're here to talk about fairness and poverty. There's a school in Birmingham today where Ofsted are making quite strong statements in relation to making them inadequate. This was a school 4 years ago which was inadequate in 2012. It's now, it was labelled outstanding, and today it'll be labelled inadequate. And on the way here today, I had a choice either to listen to John Sentamu or actually listen to the Chair of Governors and the Vice Principal. And I chose to listen to the Chair of Governors and the Vice Principal. And they both actually made quite a consistent point, and that point was that there was 3 important factors in relation to their schooling. And they were irrespective of demography, deprivation and destiny, and to ensure that that school absolutely met those respective goals. And given that schools are actually inspected based on their results and attainment, that school turned around within a 4-year period to achieving GCSEs to the value of 75%. It's regarded as one of the most highest achieving schools in the country, but yet, given its demographic, its faith, its diversity. And given that this was a national initiative to set up academies, to actually have the autonomy, to be actually part of the local community, to actually reflect the local makeup, it's now actually in this position where it's having to actually justify itself. And I was absolutely blown over to the fact that the governor, the vice principal, and all the white staff actually came over and actually made this political statement to say, public statement should I say, to say actually stop this witch hunt. Fairness shouldn't actually stop based on people's race, diversity, faith, ethnicity. And the second point that they made, which was actually really important, that what does that actually say for those people who, particularly the young people, if they actually take from that, in terms of what the government's doing to them, that they're not actually seen as equal citizens as opposed as alongside their counterparts. The second point that I would make, I think the point that you made in terms of this isn't just, it's not what you do professionally, but it's also actually what you do personally. I don't think you can actually disconnect between the two. I think they're both actually interlinked. Yeah. And what I would, for example, say is too many of our public sector leads are almost focusing on their budgets. This is the deficit reduction, so you've got the police with the 20%, the local authority with the 30 to 45%, you've got the NHS reforms and so on and so forth. I would much prefer them to actually focus on the outcomes in the local communities, identify how they can actually work together and actually work differently to address those aspirational deficits that actually exist within those communities. No parent should have to make a choice between, do I put food on the table or do I actually put the heating on? That's absolutely deplorable in today's society. So the point is, there has got to be some kind of accountability. There has got to be somewhere where you actually break down these power structures that exist within these local authority areas, where they really start thinking about what are those inequalities that actually exist and affect people in society. And the only third point that I would make in relation to that is you only actually address those issues if you actually have the knowledge to do so. And there are so many assets that actually exist within our communities that the power structures prevent that knowledge to actually service to the front so we can actually make those intelligence-led, informed decision-making. That means absolutely working differently. It means thinking about how we actually go out and actually engage with that community. It's about how representative democracy actually sees it as a mandate to increase participative democracy so we can actually really start driving forward those changes. And I think the Fairness Commission, it should almost, for example, drive that kind of imperative. And if it's able to drive that kind of imperative, it starts addressing a whole host of holistic issues, lovely. Not just those individual ones.
Thank you very much. Okay, lady with the blue jacket further up.
Liverpool, born in Brazil. I've been teaching in Toxa for the last 14 years. It's a delight to see students here and head teachers. My reality is a little bit different. I only dealt with the students that did not want to achieve, unfortunately. There's a little minority that wants to achieve, and I have that as a reward, those ones that want to achieve. Today I was listening to one quote that really struck me from the MP Tracy Green, I think. Tracy Green?
Kate Green.
Yes, Kate Green, sorry. And she said there is a phenomenal inundation of Fairness Committee. Sorry, can you hear my accent? Forgive me, and I'm dyslexic as well, not just foreigner. So there is an inundation of Fairness Committee. By the way, there is an inundation of Food Bank as well. There is an inundation of NEET people that wants to be on NEET. And you say, do they? Yes. I met many people that wants to be in NEET. But how beautiful is to hear when genuine people like those come here and say, look, I don't want to be in it. I want an opportunity. And as another professor was saying this morning, it's beyond what the Fairness Committee is. It's going beyond people. It's to analyze who want, how. But people should come more forward rather than being expecting the politicians to come with ideas and with policies. Let me see the people. What do they want? Look at that. She wanted. Let's help them. So the education is important, is priority. And you would say, well, how do I feel? I can't express how do I feel when I got to my class and I have to tell them, you need to be successful. I want to inspire you. I want to watch telly all day. My mom doesn't work. My granddad never worked. I'm sorry to bring you that to your attention. Might be different from your reality, but that's what I'm aware of. And that's what I have been dealing with. And last Fairness Committee in Liverpool, I was present, and a lady representing our black community and our Toxteth community, where I'm part of. I live in Toxteth in Liverpool. And she was saying, there are people that don't want to achieve. There are people that want to be on benefit. How are we going to take them away? Education. Education, as far as I'm concerned, is the key. Giving people the education is the key for the success of this beautiful nation, which I'm proud of, and I'm very grateful to be here.
Thank you very much. Can I ask the next contributors to be as brief as they can be? I'm sorry, but we're into injury time, and we're trying to get as many comments in as we can. It's the lady here on the third row. There they go. Yeah.
Hello, Sue Lister. I coordinate the York 50 Plus Festival, and I've just written a press release passionately saying we need to bridge the generation gap and bring younger people and older people together in a mutually beneficial way. There were 115 events in it last year. This is the 10th anniversary of it. So I am now saying widely and broadly, you are invited to put events into the 50 Plus Festival. It also brings communities together and allows people, eases isolation and loneliness, because you can put an event on. They had a bake-off at Bishopthorpe. The Poppleton Road Memorial Hall had a community day. Bring your communities together. Schools go into care homes. They work with older people on projects together, music, song, whatever it is, storytelling, poetry, sharing stories. Use something like, I'm an activist, so here is your action. Get in on a festival and bring people together, and also York International Women's Week. Okay, so see me afterwards, please.
Thank you. And just two final comments, people wanting to say something. A gentleman over here and chap here with the yellow T-shirt.
Trying more money for futures. I want to start with lies and truths. The first truth is David Cameron got something right when he said we were all in it together. The first lie is that there's a shortage of money. How does it happen? It happens because the belief system of the shortage of money is created and perpetuated by budget holders. That's the reality of it. And as long as budget holders hold power, which is what's been talked about, that will continue. It is a lie. There is not a shortage of money. There is not a shortage of resources. The second thing is this. What I would like to see is universities that have 4-year-olds doing PhDs, and I'm not being flaky about that. There is nothing exclusive about the ability to do research. Equally, I would like to see 6-year-olds in boardrooms, because what children do is they have the capacity that adults have lost, which is to cut through the bullshit and get to the facts.
Thank you very much. And the last comment here.
Hi. I'm quite dismayed to hear that testing is being increased in schools, because it's evident for me, my time in school, that the biggest problem with school systems is the testing system. It's quite perverse, I think, to tell kids from a young age that they're not good at this and that, and etc., etc. Learning and not assessing from teachers, pupils, and parents, of course, to get. There's no. And it makes focus on learning, get rid of that.
Okay. Thank you very much. provocative comment at the end. So can we just have some final comments from people? Perhaps we could just focus on the one thing you think the Fairness Commission or the Council should focus on to make a difference to the things that you raise. So, Tracy, do you want to make a start?
I think the only way is knowledge, and I think what we've heard is that our head teachers know their students. I got to know Stacey. The question the lady asked, what are the stepping stones, is we don't actually start with the people. So we need to start with the people and what they want and what motivates them, without trying to come up with some mainstream solution that we want to impose on everybody. Yeah. We are unique. You know, and I think we need to value that uniqueness and start with the person. Yeah. Everybody, you know, will have something they want, and we could really look at people as assets. That, you know, instead of trying to focus on people to fill the gap of the services that are no longer there.
Thank you, Stacey.
I was going to say knowledge, but to add on to knowledge is, I think what helped me a lot was having people believe in me. People that probably looked down the nose at me at one time now believe in me. People that's giving me a chance to show that I have got potential, just because of the way I was dressing or whatever. I have got potential. I think that is a big thing, because a lot of people within communities are scared. There's a gap because they're scared to come forward, because they think people aren't going to believe that I'm not. In fact, I think it's having that belief in them is a big, alongside the knowledge of them, is to believe in them. Even if you're not sure, you still got to believe in them, because showing that belief helps them believe in themselves, because some people have never had that or have never known that. And again, it's what they've been brought up with maybe and not known that can lead why they're in that situation.
Okay, thanks, Stacey. Can I come to you next, Tracy?
I suppose I was just thinking about your question, sir, and the fact that we do work in communities. I know the first speaker in your session, when you talked about mobilising Anglicans, we have great links with the churches in our community, and we go to residents' associations and we work with them. And I think you're absolutely right. The answer isn't just within the school or within the local authority. It's within our own communities and the partnerships and networks we have on the ground, which York does recognise through the community conversations.
Okay, thank you. David? Well, I was just going to say, does anybody want to? Yeah.
See, I think we need more support.
Yeah.
Because I find that I do better in school when I can go to somebody.
Yeah.
So, like, if I need help with something, then I know that I'm comfortable with certain teachers, so I can go and see them and ask them, right, okay, I need this, can you please help me? So I think we just need to encourage support for people.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And David, did you want to add something?
I'm going to make a bit of a sweeping generalisation. I realise that I'm in an audience of very well-educated people, but for me, the difference between a typical student who goes to Eton and a typical student who goes to York High is about self-esteem. And I think anything that anybody can do, whether it costs anything or not, is to help young people build their self-esteem, because then I think they'll be successful.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everybody. I'm sorry we didn't have longer for questions, but I've already robbed you of part of your lunch hour, so we better close. Can I just point out at the back, there's a fantastic cartoon being created of today's events, which might not be there later, so it might be worth having a look at it over lunchtime. But you need to be back here at 2. Thank you very much.